your daily reminder that Dune Part 2 was originally set to release on October 20th, 2023. 12 days ago. What Paul felt in the agony box couldn't have been half as painful as this. I want to go to the timeline where the AMPTP aren't a bunch of slimy, stingy, greedy losers, but we don't live in that timeline. So here's another reminder that SAG-AFTRA still has not reached a deal with the AMPTP. The strike is still going on. So as always, I'll be pinning comments below with resources. It's more important now than ever, and especially because we're going to be talking about 8 movies today, and they would not exist without SAG-AFTRA Guild members. So let's do a ranking of October. My ratings this month ranged from 1 star to 4 out of 5 stars. So I guess nothing in October really blew me away, but there were some good ones, and let me know what you guys thought of October's releases because there were some divisive ones as well. Or the best thing that you watched this month in general. How are you? How was your Halloween? What did you dress up as if you dressed up? You guys rock. I posted on my Instagram story and I got so many great responses, either costumes that were cool as hell, funny as hell. I was Ellen Ripley, that was my main costume, and then I also did a Jigsaw or Billy the Puppet face paint for our Patreon Halloween episode. So that was interesting. Mistakes were made. But let me know, and without further ado, let's rank October movies. At number 8, we have Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Oh, don't I love talking about bad Stephen King adaptations. I actually saw this back in September at Fantastic Fest. Very grateful for the opportunity, but wow, I have never been so wined and dined by a studio in my life. Huge red flag. We got so much swag at that screening. The cookie was good, honestly. That was my snack for like 2 days in that Airbnb. I also got this Ludlow hat. Sometimes dead is better. For anyone who hasn't seen this, it's a prequel to Pet Sematary. So they used some of the source material. They're filling in some of the blanks. And I read Pet Sematary a matter of months ago. I loved it. And I will always be unapologetically excited for a new Stephen King adaptation. Yes, the odds are against us, but when someone gets it right, it is the most amazing thing ever. But man, they didn't this time. This might even be like in the bottom 10 Stephen King adaptations because it's also a victim to just that streaming studio sheen. It particularly annoyed me that these people are supposed to be like rural, all-American, blue-collar folk, and they look like they just pulled their flannels off the rack at Hollister. But most of all, I don't understand why they made Judd the main character of this. And all due respect, I love Judd. Judd is an awesome character, but they incorporate this story from the book about Timmy Baterman, a kid who comes back from the Vietnam War, a little weird. He's not himself. And there's such great commentary to make there, and with a father grieving his son and taking things a bit too far. And that's here, but it's relegated to being a side plot. Like, we don't get to explore the dark psychological elements of that because it's focusing on Judd Crandall just because he's a recognizable character. And on top of all of that, it just gets turned into a really uninteresting, poorly and awkwardly written kind of slasher movie rather than really getting to the bottom of what makes Pet Sematary so haunting. That's mean. It's rare that I can find no redeeming qualities in a film, and I do appreciate that they incorporated indigenous actors like Isabella Starr LeBlanc and Forrest Goodwill, but I just really did not care for this movie. I gave it 1 out of 5 stars. Next, at number 7, we have The Exorcist Believer. Remember that movie? Because that came out this month. In a shocking turn of events, though, it is not in last place. But yeah, bad movie, especially in the context of a franchise that was spurred by one of, if not the best horror film ever made. I did a full-length review for this, talked a lot about David Gordon Green and all that stuff, so you can check that out if you want. I do understand people thinking that this film was overhated or getting some enjoyment out of it. I myself thought that it started off really strong with this concept of children missing and the panic that that causes as a parent and the way that that trauma can manifest in the kids. But then the rest of the movie happened. I gave The Exorcist Believer 2 out of 5 stars. At number 6, I have Five Nights at Freddy's. Look at this critic versus audience score, guys. Woof. Before you come for me, I was a student of the FNAF lore for weeks before this movie came out. I did my homework. I watched the Markiplier streams. I watched the Matt Pat videos. And I actually had so much fun doing it. Like, I completely understand the appeal of the lore in Five Nights at Freddy's now. And so I'll explain a little bit about my low rating for this film. But if you're above the age of 30 and you aren't really familiar with Five Nights at Freddy's, this is the first film adaptation of the very popular indie horror game of the same name that was created by Scott Cawthon that exploded into the the internet space and has sprouted more games, novelizations, lore, theories, entire YouTube careers. The internet phenomenon and online culture that has sprung from this is arguably just as important as the source material itself. So it was a huge deal to the fandom and just in general that this was getting adapted. They got Matthew Lillard, Josh Hutcherson, Scott Cawthon was involved in the writing process. And despite very bad early reactions from critics, fans still showed up in droves, and I'd say have mostly been enjoying it, and it doesn't really matter if they enjoy it because it has made millions and millions of dollars already. It's kind of unprecedented how much money this movie has made. On the flip side though, people who aren't familiar with FNAF, and that includes critics, have kind of been putting more weight on its weaknesses just as a film and feeling like it's too convoluted to franchise newbies. Jason Blum did say that it's just for fans, and I think that's semi-bullshit because it's still a studio film and it has to create a narrative that can appeal to more than just fans. And that's totally fine. But while I do think some people are being too harsh on this movie, I was confused. I was really confused by so many of the decisions that they made with this film when it came to lore, when it came to focusing on less interesting things, with putting multiple different twists in it that would be unsurprising to fans and not matter to non-fans, with how little Matthew Lillard is in it. My biggest observation while learning about FNAF was that William Afton is the soul of this franchise. He may be a serial child murderer, but god damn it, if the morbidity of that contrasted with the kiddie setting of basically Chuck E. Cheese isn't so delicious. And I just think that they captured almost none of that in this film. And I think it's great that a lot of fans are satisfied. I totally agree that it works as a good gateway horror film, especially since so much of the fan base is very young. And the fact that they adapted it into something at all is cool. It's a hard property to adapt with decades worth of lore, or a decade worth of lore. So there's nuance to the pros and cons of this film, but overall, I just wasn't impressed. Though I am curious to see what they'll do with the 2 planned sequels now, because the lore that they changed is gonna have a butterfly effect on like everything. But I give Five Nights at Freddy's 2 out of 5 stars. At number 5, I have Totally Killer, a new time travel slasher comedy on Prime Video. There's not much to this one. I enjoyed it. It kind of goes with something like August's You Were So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah. In the grand scheme of streaming movies, it's not bad. It's an easy watch. It's very teen-oriented. Kiernan Shipka is fun as the main character who has to travel back in time and solve this mystery of who the killer is in order to save her mom. And someone interacting with their teenage parents like back in the 80s never really gets old. I also appreciated that it doesn't romanticize the 80s, but it definitely overcorrects and kind of overdoes it with the whole, the 80s were problematic actually. But it's decently funny. There are some good stabs at true crime's exploitative nature. I think if you want something to just throw on and not pay a ton of attention to, it's a good option, but I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. At number 4, I have Kitty Green's new thriller about the inherent horrors of being a woman, The Royal Hotel. This movie belongs in the category of films that will just stress you the hell out. Uncut Gems, Shiva Baby. And it's based on a true story, which is wild. There's a documentary about it called Hotel Coolgardie, and that's how I learned that some people say that Australia is like if Alabama was a country. Sorry to any Australians who are watching this. I actually looked through a lot of the very negative reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and they're either men or Australians. I'm sure Australia is great. I want to visit there. I was quite literally named after it. But in this instance, these 2 American women who are played by Julia Green and Jessica Henwick are backpacking doing like a work and travel program, and it brings them to this bar in the middle of the outback that is a spot that's almost exclusively populated by the men who work in the mines nearby. And I didn't like this film as much as other people, which we'll get into, but I will say I have seen very few films that so accurately portray and bring you into the feeling of being a woman in a male-dominated space and that power dynamic of feeling pressured into entertaining their slimy behavior because you know they could hurt you if you don't. And it doesn't just explore that, but the different ways that women will react to it. One of the girls kind of brushes it off and sometimes even leans into it, and the other will have no part of it and gets labeled as the one who won't smile or who's a shrew and a wet blanket. And though I appreciate it tackling these things, I did think it could be a bit on the nose at times, and honestly a bit callous at times towards the former woman, the one who doesn't always completely shut it down, even though they're all victims of this situation and trying to navigate it. It's also walking a very thin line between grounded and absurd, occasionally trekking into the unbelievable, and I can't disagree with the people who feel that there's something unsatisfying about the way that it all concludes, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Not incredible. I think it's a great film to check out on streaming, especially if you, like I said, enjoy those films that just really create that feeling of discomfort and tension. At number 3, we have Fair Play, which very quietly dropped on Netflix this month. I think it wasn't quite good enough to generate the buzz that it needed. I know a lot of people who watched it and were pretty lukewarm on it, but I enjoyed it quite a bit, actually. I just love a tight thriller that plays it straight, doesn't try to be anything it's not. It's also Chloe Domont's directorial debut. It stars Alden Ehrenreich, who we just saw in Oppenheimer, and Phoebe Dynevor, I think, who's from Bridgerton, as this couple who work at the same cutthroat hedge fund, and she gets a promotion that they were both gunning for, so now he's her analyst. More power dynamics. It's definitely a pretty basic depiction of like girl boss and fragile masculinity, and I would not go so far as to call it an erotic thriller, but that doesn't make it any less entertaining. And it has Eddie Morrison. Come on. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Now we get to the top 2, the films that I'm actually very enthusiastic about. When Evil Lurks is the best horror film that has come out so far this year, and it's finally out on Shudder. This is another one that I saw at Fantastic Fest, and man, that was fun. I think it was a midnight screening. If it wasn't, it was at like 10 or 10:30, and it was so fun to see this in a crowd and just witness some of the shocking, there are so many words that you could use to describe this film. Depraved, goopy, love some good goop, but universally fucked up moments in this film. It's a very straightforward possession slash virus. It's like possession as a virus. And Demian Rugna, who also directed Terrified, which some of you might have seen already, he kind of incorporates what seems like real Argentinian folklore, but it turns out that he made it all up. And he so brilliantly uses this concept to inject dread into every single moment and just give you full body visceral reactions to these things. Watch it in the dark, volume all the way up, and feel like you just want to crawl out of your skin. It rocks. And it rips. I gave When Evil Lurks 4 out of 5 stars. And how could I not have a new Martin Scorsese film at number 1, Killers of the Flower Moon? Of course, I did a full-length review for this one. I'll link it here. What is there to say? It's a very, very important story told by one of our greatest living filmmakers, and though some of the resulting discourse has been very annoying, I think it's also just awesome that so many people are talking about it, trying to bring indigenous voices to the forefront of the conversation, and overall just having this big conversation about a very dark piece of our history as Americans that is way too seldom discussed. I still have some reservations about it, but there's no denying not only what this is as a technical accomplishment, but the ways in which Scorsese was able to do this with respect and just create such a powerful theatrical experience. If you haven't seen it yet, I do totally understand not wanting to see a 3.5-hour film in theaters, but I really encourage it. It is so worth it. It's an excellently paced movie thanks to Thelma Schoonmaker. I gave Killers of the Flower Moon 4 out of 5 stars. And read the book if you want to read the book. I think the book is better. I don't think that's a rare occurrence with historical biopics. You can just only fit so much into one movie. If you want to read the book, I will send you my copy. But there you have it, guys. Those were the 8 new releases that I saw in October. It wasn't the best month. I know a lot of people feel that way, but there were also some releases that I didn't get to that I heard were really great. Leo, I know. I'm going to try and see Leo this week in theaters. I'm actually really excited to go see it. And I guess the other ones that are good were limited releases. So maybe October was kind of mid, guys. But that's okay. I do want to say regardless that I'm sorry for not posting very frequently in October. I try to post like at least once a week, but not only has my work been getting really busy, we are really grinding with the podcast. The Patreon is still very new, so we're always adding fun new stuff, and I'm still getting used to that schedule. And I definitely am getting used to it, so I'm hoping I can have them coexist in a good way going into the holiday season, because November is going to be really crazy. There's a lot of really incredible stuff coming out, or hopefully incredible. So let me know what you're excited for in November, guys, what you've been watching recently. Don't forget to like and subscribe and keep an eye out for more videos soon. Thanks for watching.